Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first episode in English. So now you're probably wondering why all of a sudden I stopped speaking Croatian. Bez brige. Well, we have an American staying here in Karlovac for a while, and not just any American. Mr. Charles Oscar Warner III is conducting a research on war veterans for his doctorate at KU Leuven University in Belgium. Mm-hmm. Did I say it correctly?
KU Leuven, Belgium. Yeah,
okay, KU Leuven.
The university is in the U there.
Okay. Mr. Warner, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome.
You're not just an ordinary American. If I'm not mistaken, your upbringing is European, right?
That's correct. I was born in the United States, but the last part of my childhood I was raised in Germany and in Europe, and I've spent more than half of my life overseas now.
Okay, this is what I call a mixed identity. Where do you feel more at home, USA or Europe?
At this point, I pretty much have to say Europe. All my really childhood memories and everything are from Germany. I was stationed with the military. I was stationed back in Germany. So my life has really become really intertwined with a European lifestyle and identity. So it's really kind of where I feel at home. And now I live in Belgium, and work in Belgium. So I've stayed close to Europe.
You got the best of both worlds, I believe.
Yeah, if you look at it in like the geopolitical identity context of being able to mix an American nationality with European lifestyles and everything, yeah, I couldn't argue.
Your interest in war veterans is no coincidence. You yourself served in Iraq for 7 years, if I'm not mistaken.
I was active duty Air Force for 7 years, and I have a combat tour duty in Iraq as well as several other places.
Okay.
Yeah.
And subsequently 2 more years in Kosovo Peace Corps, also as an educator, yeah?
That's correct, yeah, with the U.S. federal program Peace Corps.
Yeah. So being born into a military family, probably, yeah?
Yeah.
How did the service to your country affect your views on life?
Well, if you want to take the long view, starting with the family, I'm 4th generation military. Both my parents, mom and dad, grandparents, great-grandparents and uncles and aunts have all served in the military. And so now myself, having served in the military and being a veteran, it's, in a sense, it kind of brings us a little closer together and as a family and looking at issues in the United States and what it means to serve the United States, and as veterans what we can do to make the United States a better place for everybody. And that includes my sister as well. She didn't serve in the military, but she works with war veterans or combat veterans in the United States as well, and so it kind of brings us together on a different
Did it bridge the gap between generations, because it's when you become a parent, then suddenly your parents and your child are cohesing against you because now they have a new enemy. There's always a battle between generations. So now that you are doing the same family line of work, did it make you bring closer?
I think so.
Do you have more understanding for some?
There's more of a shared identity that's more than just being family, but also having that service record behind you. So yeah, you could definitely look at it like that. I wouldn't say no.
Yeah. War veterans are a special kind of people. They have probably seen and experienced things that no man should experience or see in a lifetime, and yet the fields of veteran studies are only emerging. How can veterans enrich the civil everyday society? What are your takes on that?
Well, I think there's you can look at it from 2 different perspectives. There's, like you mentioned, there's the emerging academic fields of veteran studies. And so what anthropologists such as myself and sociologists, cultural studies, we're trying to do now is add voices to that field, veteran voices, and not just American voices, but voices from Southeast Europe, Western Europe, Southeast Asia. And so approaching it from that perspective, I think, is really one way that veterans can start becoming more of a presence in civil society and society in general. But also there's the other perspective, I guess there's not just 2, there's multiple, but another one we can mention here is kind of breaking down the social stereotypes that surround veterans, not just in Croatia, but in Germany or the United States, wherever. And I think that that's another way that veteran voices, researching veteran voices and doing ethnography with veterans kind of brings these new voices and breaks down these stereotypes that exist in society.
Because usually we are, seeing veterans as waking up in cold sweat, having a gun under their pillow.
Yeah, there's definitely that like Hollywoodization of veterans that's quite common.
Even in our movies. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I point most directly to Hollywood as kind of like the genesis for some of those stereotypes and tropes, if you will. But yeah, no, I mean, it's present in a lot of different filmscapes, cinemascapes in different countries and everything. So yeah, breaking down that stereotype where, there's the veterans can function on a number of different levels and actually organize themselves quite more rapidly than some non-military people who don't have a military background. So like earthquakes, for example, military veterans in Croatia, from my research, has indicated that they were able to organize quite quickly as a response, as a civil response to the earthquake, because of the military past that they have behind them. They know command and control. They know, okay, this is my job, I'm going to do it, and I know she has a job to be doing and she's going to do it. The militaries, the veterans have that kind of background.
Crisis behavior is something that is imprinted on
them. Yeah, it's imprinted on them, but it's not something that dictates their life either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they can be normal citizens in everyday life.
Well, what's normal? But I see what you're saying. But yeah, absolutely. So it's really about highlighting within society that not every veteran is troubled. Not every veteran is a burden on society.
Yeah.
There's contributions that can be made.
Not everyone wears a cloud over their head.
Exactly. And when it comes to mental health, it's obviously not a problem that only affects veterans either. And so it's
Well. The topics or maybe the goals that you start to achieve with your research are post-conflict resolution and strategic long-term peace building. This is very interesting to me. Anyone who has experienced war will instantly connect to those and appreciate those ideas. But it's a difficult process getting there, very difficult and very long. What are, in your opinion, so far, the best techniques and strategies for accomplishing those goals?
Well, my approach, and what I've argued is that one of the best approaches to long-term peace building and creating models of long-term peace building that maybe we can look at from different ways is via what anthropologists and social scientists call ethnography. Mm-hmm. And that's meeting and staying and living with a particular group, say veterans, or within a particular society, say Karlovac or Croatia, for a long term, and seeing how peace building is already happening, how post-conflict resolution has happened in the past, and then looking at how some new voices can be brought into this, and really looking at the long-term dynamics with this. And with this, you also start to think about new ideas about how veterans interact with society, how society can look at strategic peace building, long-term peace building. And so you think of these new ideas. One idea that I've been playing with is called veteranality. Not playing with, but introducing and working with and testing it with the veterans and seeing how they respond to it.
So could you explain it?
It's veteranality. It's kind of like, I think about it in the same way as masculinity, femininity, sexuality, veteranality.
Okay.
It's a way of being in the world for former combatants.
Okay.
And so there's all these different things that can kind of be brought into that conversation and covered by that word. And then that word, that idea, then informs what it means to be veteran, the identity veteran in society.
Yeah, it's much more than just a cultural identity.
I think so, I think so. And when you start looking at it from this perspective, then you're like, okay, well, why aren't these voices brought into long-term peace building models? Mm-hmm. Why haven't they been brought to the table to talk with other specialists or experts about peace building or post-conflict resolution? So it's those questions that I'm asking right now.
Yeah, maybe it's because historically people were not, inclined to talk what it was like in the war. They tend to leave the war behind.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different reasons that you could look at. I think that's a strong one. There are many veterans who just aren't interested in speaking about those experiences, and and that's of course their right.
That's
that's their privilege in a sense. But I think that that default kind of overshadows the veterans who do want to be at the table and who do really want to volunteer and stand up like, no, I want to say something about this, and not just talk about my service, but talk about what I can help with now. Wow.
Okay. That's a great point. So traditionally, we hear, we are in the area where since Roman ages, we have been battling. So there's always conflict here in this peninsula. And sometimes, traditionally, people tend to, put the things a bit under the carpet, So that's like the traditional way. But there's some new strategies arising.
Well, I think so, and that's really kind of one of the points and the ideas behind anthropology and ethnography is to leave where you were at before, come someplace new, and figure out what has been happening in the past and how the present is shaping the future in a sense as well, in a local sense. So not just sitting in Belgium and saying that, okay, this is what we think has happened in the past in Southeast Europe, so this is what we think is happening now, and oh hey, Southeast Europe, here's our solution for it. No, anthropology and ethnography kind of looks more domestically, if you will, at the internal stories that are happening and then internal voices, and then trying to see, okay, well, what's working, what's not working, and then can we build something for the larger Eastern Europe area or Central Asia or something.
Not just specific solutions, but something that is
how can these new voices outside of the North Atlantic, Western Europe, hegemony, how can that be violated in a sense? It's a good word. I love this word, hegemony. It's great. It's great. Yeah.
So after the service to your country, you decided to pursue a career in science, or you did some career in science and then returned for the Kosovo Peace Corps. And is it true that a certain number of veterans tried to move away from the horrors of the war and what they experienced, and then try a different constructive approach in their career choices? It's not as if they're distancing themselves from what they survived, but maybe it's better to say that they transform that emotional energy into a constructive drive to maybe make a better world.
Okay, so to start at the first part of that question, I started my university after the military. I was in the military 7 years, and I went for my first degree in the United States. And then I did a second degree, Master's of Science in Anthropology, so my second degree in Anthropology in Belgium. And now I'm doing the doctorate in Anthropology
you
as well.
Set your sights, you're sticking to.
The clarity is rare, I think, a little bit. And it's something that I've really kind of followed with a passion. But and I think for the latter part of your question that you asked there, it's to each their own in a sense. Some veterans, some combat veterans, when they leave the military service, they go into private security, or they go into military contracting or do other civilian related aspects with the U.S. military. But there are a number of social scientists. Well, I don't know if I could claim the term rebel, if we could claim the term rebels, and kind of switching it around a little bit and leaving military service and then looking at it in peace building or serving in Peace Corps. I will say that I was one of the few, if not the very few, military veterans that I heard about or met while I was in Peace Corps. So that does seem to be a bit of a rarity, military veteran to Peace Corps volunteer. But no, especially in the United States, you have a growing body of veterans, I think, who are engaging in different aspects of the social sciences. It might not be immediately peace and stability, but other aspects of understanding veteran studies, contributing to veteran studies, looking at it from more of the veteran healthcare, so in their own way helping with the aftermath of warfare and the aftermath of combat.
Have you met with those people?
Oh yeah, of course. Some of their literature and research predates my own in a different path, in a different way, and looking at what can be veteran studies. And so we have the conferences are small. There's not many of them right now. It's not like
how powerful is the drive?
Well, I mean, you know, when a veteran gets a hold of something, we can really sink our teeth into it and stick with it. You know, we have that clarity of purpose and drive, perhaps, that can be very visible and very cohesive. Yeah. You know, so it's growing, I think, and it's growing in different directions, and that's really a positive thing to see. So it's not so much focused on veterans who have mental health problems, or veterans who are in the hospital, or veterans who are in the clinics, but about veterans in society and looking at how they influence political movements, how they influence strategy and laws and acceptance within societies, you know, and creating an idea, or creating the reservoirs of resilience in societies to adapt to new ideas or to accept what different futures might look like, I think.
And on that positive note, we'll end the first part of this podcast. And if you haven't still, grab a cup of coffee, make some popcorns, because in the latter part, we'll learn more about what Charles is doing here in Croatia and how was your reception here. So stick around and press pause. And we're back. This is the second part of our first podcast in English in total. And of course, once again, welcome to Charles Warner, the social anthropologist from USA, who is spending some time here in Croatia. We did a lot about your history and the choices and why you went to social anthropology, especially with veterans. And we stated at the beginning that the veterans are a breed of their own. But how well do they cooperate internationally, between themselves? Because once you're a member of one army, do you speak to the members of other armies, or maybe adversary armies after the war?
You know, and this is a really strong, interesting research question. It's actually one of my one of two primary research questions driving my project here. And I don't have a complete answer for you yet. It's ongoing. Initial ethnographic experiences and the stories that I've been hearing and responses to my interview questions demonstrate to me so far that there is a kind of strong imagined connection between veterans that is transnational. That being a veteran is not tied to a nationality, so it doesn't have to have a nationalistic root to it. It can be something that is more of a trans-regional, transnational social identity.
So everybody connects to brothers in arms from dire straits.
It's possible. To quote, it's a song that comes up frequently when I ask about some of the music influences and everything else like that. But yeah, no, I think there's some strong indicators that that kind of underpin this idea of veteranality that can be an international kind of understanding of what it means to be, or underpinning of what can be a veteran and a veteran in society.
Here's a thought. This is just my opinion. Personally, I believe that the veterans, could be great, among other things, cultural ambassadors, because a war veteran can and probably would connect to others without wasting too much time. What we said, focus, yeah? So we have great artists who served in the military, and this is something to be said. Jimi Hendrix, parachute, paratrooper, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Maynard James Keenan from Tool, or
Hunter S. Thompson, favorite of mine.
Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S. Thompson. Air Force, he was Air Force veteran.
Favorite of mine also. I didn't even know about him, but I'm just talking about the famous musicians. And Ray Manzarek from The Doors, but Hunter S. Thompson especially, So how well can veterans communicate, and when they do communicate, what are your experiences? What is the effect of that communication? How does the society respond to that?
Yeah, no, and I think you kind of touched on one of the more interesting points when it comes to when unknown veterans come together for the first time. They do have a way, we do have a way of kind of cutting through the, let's see, what's a polite word, the molasses, you know, cutting through the honey real quick to get to the nuts and bolts of who somebody is, where they served at, and what we have in common, what the veterans have in common.
Things begin to happen.
And then things that, you know, that baseline for conversation can be arrived at quite quickly, I think. And the only thing with that is there's some different dynamics that have to be taken into play about that. It's the nature of the combat that they served in, when it was, how long ago it was. So like for right now we see in the media, and some social scientists are tracking along with this as well, that American veterans from Vietnam and Vietnamese veterans obviously from Vietnam are now coming together. They walk the beaches of Da Nang together. Okay. They share, the pilots, so the combat pilots share their journals of, not journals, but the flight logs, their hour logs of where they were during combat. Like, oh, we were in the air almost at the same place over the same time. Oh, well, that's interesting. So it's looking at the time that must go by for those conversations. Yeah. So it's looking at those different dynamics that we really have to start paying more attention to, I think, and looking at and seeing and listening to the veterans who speak about those things, because I think there's more and more veterans in Croatia who have very small issue with meeting with Serbian veterans and sitting down having coffee and talking a little bit and everything. I think I'm seeing more and more readiness for that and willingness for that than what may be generally acknowledged, just as an example.
Okay, so veterans as cultural ambassadors, all of those people we were talking about, Jimmy, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Hunter S. Thompson, Waynard James Keenan, Ray Manzarek, you trust them from the first second they start performing. Is that something that veterans have, that some kind of, I don't know, integrity?
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I can see,
because people respond to that naturally, but they say, "This is my guy. This is it."
Yeah. There's a sense, perhaps, on the part of the veteran meeting another veteran, that we have an implicit shared experience.
Yeah.
And that can...
No molasses.
No molasses. And that can lead to definitely an immediate connection on integrity and mutual respect, mutual integrity, and being able to kind of build a life experience, conversation, what have you, on that integrity. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks within society in general as well, because, Hendrix, some of these examples might be a bit complicated when we start unpacking them a little bit. It's like, well, some military, some veterans of Hendrix's generation, they might not have connected most immediately with Hendrix as a veteran, considering
especially the anthem.
Direction. Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's some different stories there, but again, there's an important dynamic of time with that, and I don't think we fully understand that yet.
Okay. So in your opinion, how important is justice and the prosecution of war crimes for post-conflict resolution? How well has mankind managed to cope with that challenge?
So
it's a heavy question.
It's a heavy question, and it's a question that we could dedicate several podcasts to, I think. But I think the short and sweet version of this, and maybe the most positive answer for this, is like to look at some of the previous examples. Most notably, that comes to mind, is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa after apartheid. Okay. I think that's a really strong model. There's a lot of strong experiences. There's a lot of, there's a large body of, I don't want to say research, but
documentation,
academic engagement with what happened during the Truth and Reconciliation process, the impacts it had on society in South Africa. And I wonder if we are doing enough to kind of learn from those lessons and bring those lessons to other places in the world, not just Southeast Europe, but many different places. And so that would be, I think that is a really kind of key dynamic that we need to bring more into when we talk about truth and justice and prosecution.
Okay, but peace in South Africa is connected closely to Mandela, this statement. So do we have these kinds of moral integrity here? Yeah. Do you need to have a strong statesman and then have integrity, or can the society build it through their own?
My belief and my professional perspective on it is that society can build the capacities to do this on their own. You don't necessarily need a strong nation, like national identity, or a strong one individual to build this around. So I think society itself can build these capacities for not so much to forget, but to forgive, and to, more importantly, understand, and this is where veterans, I think, come into play with it quite strongly, is to remember what happened during warfare and to allow veterans to speak about this and say, one of the things that we don't want to see as veterans is a repeat of this. Okay. So we need to figure out how to break this cycle of warfare and allow for this forgiveness, this truth, the reconciliation, and everything. I think a complicating dynamic of this is when the word apology gets thrown around.
Okay, yeah.
And that's a word that doesn't really pass easily in a number of different areas, and it really kind of complicates it.
One of the first mistakes I made in the podcast with the veterans from Karlovac is that I said the enemy army. They said, no, not the enemy army, the adversaries.
Yes.
So they are thinking militarily. We are not, we are thinking through propaganda that we had during the war.
Yeah.
And
not even just during the war, but after the war as well.
So as you said, while we were preparing for the podcast, most of veteran studies are based on experiences of Americans or British veterans, but you chose to go to the south and east of Europe. So how do veterans from these parts differ from those, or the experiences, how do they differ?
Again, it's a little early to really kind of sketch out some of the differences, but I will say that the thing that I would like to point to most readily about this is that we need to bring these voices from the so-called margins into the more mainstream narratives within academia, within the political sciences, within the European Union, within NATO as well, when it comes to relations between the EU, Eastern Europe, and as we move farther east, geopolitically speaking. So I think that there are some differences, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think one of these similarities is this kind of initiation, not initiation, but kind of a prompt from veterans to make sure that we're using the correct word. So like you said, enemy versus adversary. Enemy has a lot of different connotations, political baggage. Yeah. Adversary is, the veterans are like, because of the nature of war, we were fighting somebody, but I don't think of them as an enemy anymore. They were an adversary at the time. Now, perhaps, depending on who you speak to, they're veterans the same as I am.
You said it great, the nature of war. That is something that we seem to forget as a society, the nature of war. What happens during wartime is the nature of war. It's not our nature. And that's a great thought.
Yeah, I think you can unpack that and go some different directions with it, absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's like what happens in war isn't necessarily, what happens today in society isn't an automatic reflection of what happened in the war. The divisions that you find in war are not something that have to exist today in society.
A great thought.
I think veterans can really move the political narratives in that direction and the media narratives in that direction. So it's not so much a polarized debate, but conversations that can be held with integrity and respect more in the center of the spectrum.
So you recently come to Karlovac and you're staying here till November?
I'll be in Croatia until November and Karlovac through the summer.
Through the summer. Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
So the organization that is hosting your stay here is Udruga pripadnika 110. brigade zbora Narodne garde, odnosno Hrvatske vojske. They are having an important anniversary right now, 30 years of forming the troops and the defense of the city. So what are your impressions of the city of Karlovac and the people that defended it?
To start off with, I think I picked a great place in Croatia to be able to spend the summer. I think, everybody speaks to me about the four rivers, and so that's really been, a pleasing dynamic for a hot summer in Croatia, is having the old town of Karlovac, having the rivers and everything that create the stage for the 30th anniversary celebrations and memorials for the 110th. Just a point of clarification, I do a lot of my work with the 110th here, but to say that they're hosting me would be a bit of a, just for clarity's sake, because I don't want to put the 110th in the position of like, people asking, why are you hosting the anthropologist or something?
Sorry, my mistake.
No. It's just a point of clarification so that the 110th doesn't get in any hot water for having the anthropologist in Karlovac. But I'm reaching out to different stakeholders is one kind of word for it, but just residents and people in Karlovac who either lived through the war here in 91 through 95, or were our veterans from that conflict, and just it's been a really interesting kind of series of conversations that are really kind of shaping my stay here in Karlovac in a really fun, fantastic way, and really kind of insightful for my research here with veterans as well.
Well, I hope we'll be of more help till the end of summer, and hope you'll have a great time here, because now the summer is packed with the events here, I hope you'll have a good time here and do a lot of good work. And I'll thank you for your conversation today and for this podcast. It is a refreshment to see somebody who is doing something. You're off the charts with your interests, you're not a stereotypical visitor here, and it's a breath of fresh air having someone like you here.
Well, thank you very much for the invite, and hopefully Off the Charts becomes more center of the charts in the future. Hopefully I'm not too far off with my research that in the end it's something that's not a viable kind of...
we hope that this is a conversation that will take place in the future.
Very much.
And thank you for that. So thank you for coming here.
My pleasure.
And thanks for your attention. So as you see, we can go English too, so or American if we need to. Stay with us for the next episode, and many thanks to Charlesom Warnerom and the 110th Brigade who are celebrating their 30th anniversary.